Have you ever felt the sting of a casual insult? The kind that's disguised as a joke, but leaves a bitter taste in your mouth all night? Last night, I experienced something similar, except it wasn't a joke. My father-in-law, a man who seems to measure worth by outdated standards, looked at the dinner I'd prepared, a simple, home-cooked meal, and sneered, calling it a disgusting excuse for dinner. It wasn't just the words, but the way he said them, the dismissive tone that cut deeper than any knife. If you've ever been there, if you believe that kindness matters, that family should lift you up instead of tearing you down, then please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in the power of karma. If you think that good action should be rewarded and that those who spread negativity should face the consequences of their actions. I know you're a good person, and that's why you're here. So please show your support and let's build a community that values respect and empathy. Also, drop a comment and tell me what city you're from. I'd love to know where my listeners are tuning in from. Now, let me tell you my story. It's become a ritual. This Thursday night dinner with my in-laws. A ritual I dread. My partner, Alex, insists it's important for family, especially for the kids, young Rhea and Leo. And I get it, I do. Family is important. But sometimes, family gatherings feel less like warm get-togethers and more like grueling endurance tests. Alex's parents, Richard and Eleanor, are traditional, to put it mildly. Richard, his father, carries himself with an air of old-world authority, a belief that a woman's place is solely in the home, catering to her husband's every whim. Eleanor, his mother, is subtler, her judgments delivered with a sweet smile and a carefully raised eyebrow, making it hard to take offense, even when you feel it simmering beneath the surface. Preparing for these dinners is always a tightrope walk. I try to keep the meals simple, a pasta bake, a roast chicken, nothing too elaborate, because, honestly, after a long week juggling work and kids, my energy is stretched thin. Thursday evenings arrive, and I'm often running on fumes, trying to create a semblance of a pleasant family atmosphere. Yesterday was particularly chaotic. 3 urgent calls from Rhea's school, a frantic search for Leo's missing soccer cleats, and a minor kitchen mishap involving an exploding container of tomato sauce. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I was ready to collapse. So, I opted for an easy dish, a vegetable lasagna. The kids love it, it's relatively healthy, and it requires minimal effort. Or so I thought. The moment Richard and Eleanor stepped through the door, I could sense Richard's mood. He had that familiar scowl etched on his face, the one that suggested the entire world was conspiring to inconvenience him. He huffed and sighed, his every movement a dramatic performance of displeasure. Lately, this had become his default setting, a constant undercurrent of negativity that I'd learned to navigate, or at least try to ignore. The trouble started, as it often does, with the food. I placed the lasagna on the table, the aroma of herbs and cheese filling the air. The kid's eyes lit up, eager to dig in. But Richard, he just stared at it, his nose wrinkling as if he'd encountered something foul. He circled the dish, sniffing theatrically, his expression a mask of disgust. The kids, initially excited, began to fidget, their smiles fading under his scrutiny. Then came the words, the ones that hung in the air like a dark cloud. "This is the best you could manage?" Richard's voice dripped with disdain. It looks rather uninspired. I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. I wanted to defend my efforts, to explain the chaos of the day, the sheer exhaustion that comes with trying to balance everything. But before I could utter a word, Alex chimed in, and his words were like a sucker punch. Instead of defusing the situation or even remaining neutral, he offered a weak smirk and a sarcastic comment. "Well, you know," he said, his gaze fixed on his father, "some people prioritize other things over culinary excellence, like marrying into a family for reasons." He let the word reasons linger in the air, heavy with implication. The insinuation was clear. I'd married him for his family's supposed wealth or status, a notion so ludicrous it would be laughable if it weren't so hurtful. We're a normal middle-class family with a mortgage and bills like everyone else. I tried to interject, to steer the conversation away from this dangerous territory, especially with the kids present. "Can we please not do this in front of the children?" I pleaded, my voice tight with suppressed emotion. But Alex, emboldened by his father's silent approval, plowed on. Maybe, he said, his eyes meeting mine with a coldness I didn't recognize, if you put as much effort into this marriage as you do into playing the victim, we might actually have a decent meal once in a while. The words hit me like a physical blow. The air seemed to thicken, the room to shrink. A heavy silence descended upon the table. Eleanor, who had been observing the exchange with a strained smile, busied herself by refilling her wine glass, avoiding my gaze. The kids, sensing the shift in atmosphere, fell silent, their earlier chatter replaced by an uneasy stillness. I just sat there, stunned. What was I supposed to say? If I defended myself, I'd be accused of being dramatic. If I left, I'd be creating a scene. I was trapped, caught in a web of their making, forced to endure their callousness in my own home. The onslaught continued. Richard, seizing the opportunity, launched into a tirade about my job, how it was a cute hobby, but not a real career, how a real woman would prioritize the home and her husband's needs above all else. He painted a picture of some idealized version of womanhood, a step-forward wife who existed only to serve. My own mother worked full-time and raised a family. Then came the comments about my appearance. Those leggings aren't real pants, you know, Richard declared, his eyes scanning my outfit with disapproval. Back in my day, women took pride in their appearance. I was wearing comfortable clothes, jeans, and a t-shirt, practical attire for a day spent running errands and cleaning. It wasn't about a lack of effort. It was about prioritizing comfort over conforming to their outdated expectations. Eleanor, throughout this entire ordeal, remained a passive observer, her gaze fixed on some distant point, as if she were waiting for the walls to close in. She offered no words of support, no attempt to diffuse the tension, only a silent complicity that felt just as damaging. And Alex, he sat there, a detached expression on his face, as if this entire scene were perfectly normal. He picked at his food, his demeanor suggesting he was above it all, too sophisticated to engage in such petty drama. The lack of support from him was a punch in the gut. I tried to encourage the kids to eat, to salvage some semblance of normalcy, but their eyes darted between their grandfather and me, their faces mirroring my own distress. My daughter, bless her heart, piped up, declaring that she liked the lasagna. But Richard, in his infinite wisdom, dismissed her comment with a wave of his hand. "Of course you do, sweetie," he said, his voice condescending. "Kids don't know any better." At that moment, something inside me snapped. I was tired of the constant criticism, tired of the lack of support, tired of feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own home. The fight drained out of me. I didn't have the energy to argue, to defend myself. I just wanted the evening to end. I reached for my phone, seeking refuge in the digital world. I scrolled through Instagram, mindlessly liking photos, anything to distract myself from the toxic atmosphere at the table. I sent a desperate text to my sister, "Help me." I typed, adding a string of crying emojis. Her response, a funny meme, offered a brief moment of levity, but it couldn't penetrate the heavy cloud of negativity that enveloped me. Richard, oblivious to my silent plea for escape, continued his tirade, his voice rising in volume. He regaled us with tales of the good old days, when women supposedly knew their place, when a woman like me would have been sent packing for daring to challenge the established order. Alex actually laughed. His laughter was like a knife twisting in the wound. I didn't recognize the man he was in that moment, the man who seemed so eager to earn his father's approval, even at my expense. It made no sense. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, and began to collect the plates. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to do something, anything, to break the suffocating tension. Eleanor, feigning concern, asked if I was upset. I ignored her. I carried the dishes to the sink, the clattering of the plates a release from my pent-up frustration. I didn't slam them, but I certainly didn't handle them with care. Alex, ever the provocateur, asked if I was going to cry. The absurdity of the question was almost comical. I was trying to hold myself together. I told him I was fine. He rolled his eyes. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced politeness and strained conversation. The kids retreated to their room after dessert, seeking solace in the digital glow of their tablets. I let them have extra screen time, abandoning my usual rules in the face of the extraordinary circumstances. Eleanor attempted to make small talk, discussing the weather as if nothing had transpired. Richard muttered under his breath, lamenting the state of the world. Alex, incredibly, had the audacity to ask what I was planning to cook for dinner the next night. I almost laughed. "I don't know, Alex," I replied, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Maybe you should ask your father for some recipes." He didn't find it amusing. I finished the dishes, mechanically wiping down the counters, my mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. Then, I retreated to our bedroom, locking the door behind me. Not out of anger, but out of a desperate need for solitude. I spent hours scrolling through TikTok, seeking a distraction from the events of the evening. Alex came in later, wordlessly changed his clothes, and went to bed. He offered no apology, no acknowledgement of his behavior, no attempt to bridge the chasm that had widened between us. I lay awake for hours, replaying the evening in my mind, wondering how I was supposed to move forward, how I could possibly pretend that everything was normal. The thought of leaving crept into my mind, a desperate yearning for escape. Not necessarily a permanent departure, but a temporary retreat, a weekend away with the kids, a chance to breathe and clear my head. But then the practicality of it all set in, the logistics, the planning, the sheer exhaustion of packing and unpacking. Was I running away, or was I taking necessary action? I considered confiding in my friends, seeking their advice, but a sense of weariness washed over me. Most of them wouldn't understand. They'd offer well-meaning platitudes. "That's just how in-laws are." Or "Alex is probably just stressed." They wouldn't grasp the depth of the disrespect, the insidious nature of the emotional erosion I was experiencing. And so, I find myself at a crossroads, a precipice of uncertainty. I feel like I'm waiting for something to break, for the dam to burst. I can't continue to let this pattern of behavior persist, but I'm unsure of the next course of action. The memory of their words, their dismissive glances, their casual cruelty, replays endlessly in my mind. The ease with which they tore me down in my own home is particularly haunting. It's as if I'm an unwelcome intruder, tolerated only for my domestic contributions. The way Alex looked at me, a mixture of embarrassment and disdain, cuts deep. And Eleanor's silent complicity, her refusal to intervene, speaks volumes. I'm not claiming to be perfect, far from it. I have my flaws, my moments of weakness. There are days when I'd rather scroll through my phone than tackle the mounting laundry, when I forget appointments, when I'm short-tempered with the kids. I prioritize comfort over fashion. But none of that, I believe, warrants the treatment I received. And the thought that keeps circling in my head is, what if I just stopped? What if I ceased performing my expected role? What if they were forced to confront the reality of my contributions, the invisible labor that holds our lives together? So, here I am, pouring out my thoughts, seeking solace in sharing my experience. I don't have a solution, no grand plan of action, but I know I can't remain passive any longer. I'm not the kind of person who silently endures mistreatment. Not anymore. I'll keep you updated. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm determined to find a path forward. A path that leads to self-respect and dignity. The morning after the disastrous dinner, I woke up to a house that felt different, off-kilter. Alex was already up, perched at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone and sipping his coffee, acting as if the previous night's events had never occurred. The sheer normalcy of his demeanor was jarring, almost insulting. He even offered me the last of the oat milk, a gesture so mundane it felt like a calculated attempt to minimize the tension, to pretend that his words and his parents' behavior hadn't inflicted any damage. The kids, usually a whirlwind of morning energy, were uncharacteristically subdued. They ate their cereal in silence, their eyes darting between Alex and me, a palpable sense of unease hanging in the air. I tried to engage my daughter, Ria, asking if she wanted to wear her favorite blue sneakers, the ones she usually insisted on. She simply shrugged, her usual enthusiasm absent. My son, Leo, attempted a light-hearted joke about the lasagna, a reference to his dislike of peas, but his voice trailed off as he met my gaze, the humor fading from his face. It was clear they sensed the undercurrent of conflict, the unspoken tension that permeated the house. I went through the motions of the morning routine, packing lunches, ensuring homework was in backpacks, and hustling everyone out the door for school drop-off. But once I dropped them off, I lingered in the car, the silence amplifying the turmoil within me. I checked my phone, mindlessly scrolling through social media, seeking a distraction from my thoughts. I even started reading a Reddit thread, drawn into the drama of a stranger's neighborly dispute, anything to avoid confronting the reality of my own situation. But the numbness couldn't last forever. After 10 minutes, the weight of it all crashed down on me. I realized I couldn't continue to bury my feelings, to pretend that everything was okay. I reached out to Tara. We weren't particularly close, but she possessed a refreshing honesty, a willingness to speak her mind, and a complete lack of tolerance for injustice. I sent her a quick text. Family dinner was a disaster. Want to get coffee? Her response was immediate, sure. We met at a bustling cafe, a place that was usually packed, but miraculously, a table was available. I recounted the events of the previous evening, the demeaning comments, Alex's lack of support, the suffocating atmosphere of disapproval. Tara listened intently, her expression hardening as I spoke. When I finished, she stared at me for a moment, her silence pregnant with meaning. Then she let loose. Your father-in-law is a dinosaur, she declared, her voice firm. And Alex has always been a little too desperate for his approval. I offered a weak laugh, but I knew she was right. Alex's need for his father's validation often overshadowed his consideration for my feelings. Tara's next question was direct, incisive. Why do you let them treat you like that? I stumbled, searching for an answer. It's easier to ignore it than to fight every time, I offered, the excuse sounding flimsy even to my own ears. Tara didn't let me off the hook. Maybe it's easier, she countered, but it's not better. Her words resonated with a painful truth. I had been choosing the path of least resistance, prioritizing a fragile peace over my own well-being. But in doing so, I was slowly eroding my self-worth. I returned home to a barrage of texts from Alex, inquiring about my whereabouts, wondering if I was coming home for lunch. This was unusual. We rarely had lunch together. The sudden interest felt suspicious, as if he were trying to monitor my movements. I ignored his messages, a newfound resolve hardening within me. Instead of diving into dinner preparations, I stopped. Why was I planning a meal for people who treated me with such disdain? Not today. I ordered pizza for the kids, pepperoni for Leo, cheese for Rhea, a deliberate choice to avoid any potential complaints. When Alex arrived home, he took one look at the pizza boxes and demanded, "Are you still sulking?" "Maybe I'm just done." Period, I retorted, the finality in my voice leaving no room for argument. He rolled his eyes, muttering about my tendency to hold onto grievances. "Yeah, I'm not letting this go." "Not this time," I affirmed. Then Eleanor arrived, her entrance unannounced, her demeanor a mask of concern. She breezed in as if nothing was amiss, her presence a calculated attempt to smooth things over and restore the usual routine. "Can we talk in private?" she requested, her tone carefully calibrated to convey concern without veering into confrontation. I led her to the hallway, bracing myself for the inevitable attempt at damage control. "I know Richard's comments can be harsh," she began, her voice soft and placating, "but he's just old-fashioned. Don't take it personally." I stared at her, incredulous. "He called me lazy and useless in front of my children," I stated, my voice flat. "Well, he doesn't mean it like that," she countered, her tone dismissive. "You know how he is." "Yeah, and I'm done pretending it's okay," I replied, my resolve unwavering. She shifted her tactics, attempting to guilt-trip me with appeals to family unity and Alex's supposed pressure. "He's under pressure from what?" I challenged, my voice rising. "Sitting at the table while his father insults his wife?" Eleanor appeared uncomfortable, her gaze shifting away from mine. She fidgeted with the zipper of her purse, her usual composure faltering. "You know Richard only wants what's best for Alex," she offered weakly. "What about what's best for me? Or for the kids?" I pressed, my voice laced with frustration. She had no answer. Instead, she resorted to a familiar refrain. You're not like the women in our family. You don't just do what needs to be done. Maybe that's the problem, I retorted, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Eleanor, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, slammed the door as she exited, her departure a dramatic punctuation mark to our tense exchange. Alex, witnessing the tail end of our conversation, remained silent. He retrieved a beer from the refrigerator and retreated to the living room, settling in front of the television, the silence between us thick with unspoken conflict. The kids, sensing the ongoing tension, remained in their room, the volume of their tablets turned up to an excessive level, a desperate attempt to create a barrier against the negativity. I didn't protest. I was too emotionally drained to enforce screen time limits. I sat alone at the dining table, scrolling through old photos on my phone, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. I tried to pinpoint the moment when things had deteriorated to this point, when the undercurrent of resentment had become so pervasive. Had it always been there, lurking beneath the surface, masked by my willingness to accommodate? The next morning, I woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. I was done being the default parent, the unpaid house manager, the silent enabler of their behavior. I didn't do laundry. I left Alex's dirty socks where they lay, scattered on the floor. I ignored the crumbs on the kitchen counters, the overflowing dishwasher. Alex, searching for his blue shirt, asked if I had seen it. Try the laundry basket, I replied, my tone devoid of its usual helpfulness. He glared at me, his expression suggesting I had committed a grave offense. I simply shrugged, refusing to engage. The kids noticed the shift in my behavior. Rhea requested pancakes for breakfast. Sure, I responded, if you want to help make them. She agreed, and we worked together in the kitchen, the simple act of cooking a shared experience, a welcome contrast to the previous evening's tension. Alex declined to join us for breakfast, his silence a palpable expression of his disapproval. Later that day, Eleanor texted, her message a thinly veiled attempt to assert control. You can't just stop doing things because you're upset. I ignored her. Throughout the day, I became acutely aware of the sheer volume of tasks I performed daily, the countless invisible acts that kept our household functioning. It wasn't about seeking recognition or praise. It was about acknowledging the reality of my contributions, the imbalance of labor that had become the norm. I began documenting my activities, taking photos of grocery receipts, piles of laundry, my calendar filled with appointments and school events. I created a folder on my phone, not as evidence to be used against Alex, but as a means of self-validation, a way to make tangible the work that often went unseen. Alex witnessed my documentation efforts and inquired about my actions. Just documenting, I replied. He rolled his eyes, dismissing my actions as dramatic. As the week progressed, the atmosphere in the house continued to shift. The kids started asking more questions, their curiosity piqued by the change in routine. Rhea inquired about visiting my mother. Maybe, I responded, but Grandma lives 3 hours away, and it's not a quick trip. My mother called that evening, sensing the underlying tension in my voice. Is everything all right? She asked. Not really, but I'm figuring it out, I replied, offering a vague reassurance. She offered to come visit, but I declined, not yet ready to fully articulate the extent of the situation. On Saturday, Richard called again. This time I answered. I wanted to hear his perspective, to understand the depth of his conviction in his outdated beliefs. He launched into his familiar tirade, the same tired rhetoric about the good old days when women supposedly ran the house and served their husbands. Well, it's not your day anymore, I countered, my voice firm. You're going to ruin this family with your attitude, he declared, his voice rising in anger. Maybe it needs ruining, I retorted, the words hanging in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. He hung up on me. Later that afternoon, Eleanor arrived, her demeanor a carefully constructed facade of concern. She carried a bag of groceries, a peace offering disguised as helpfulness. I brought things for dinner, she announced, her smile strained. Let's just start over. I'm not cooking, I stated, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. Her carefully maintained composure faltered. "You're serious?" she asked, incredulity lacing her tone. "Dead serious," I affirmed. "If you want to cook, the kitchen's right there." She huffed, placing the bag on the counter with unnecessary force, and began chopping vegetables, her movements stiff and resentful. Alex watched from the living room, his expression unreadable, offering no assistance. When dinner was ready, Eleanor attempted to maintain a facade of normalcy, but her underlying anger was palpable. She had prepared a dish with an excessive amount of garlic, a culinary act of passive aggression that the kids largely rejected. Alex ate in silence, then abruptly pushed his chair back and left the table, his departure a dramatic display of his displeasure. My son, ever observant, asked if we could have pizza again the following night. After dinner, I needed to escape. I went for a walk, leaving my watch at home, carrying only my phone, seeking solace in the anonymity of the evening air. Upon my return, I found Alex in the bedroom, engrossed in his phone. "Do you want to talk?" I asked, my voice tentative. "About what?" he responded, his tone dismissive. "About everything," I clarified, my gaze steady. "I'm tired. Can we not do this?" he countered, his words a blatant attempt to avoid confrontation. "Sure," I replied, the word laced with a weariness that mirrored his. I left the room, closing the door softly behind me, and sat in the hallway for a long time. Not because I wanted to cry, but because I needed to create physical distance to separate myself from the tension that permeated our shared space. The next day, I began to formulate a plan. I created a comprehensive list of all my responsibilities, every task I performed, every errand I ran, every appointment I scheduled. I documented the kids' needs, the household chores, the invisible labor that constituted the framework of our lives. I started moving some of my belongings into the guest room, a symbolic gesture of separation, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had grown between us. Alex noticed my actions and questioned my motives. "Just needed space," I replied, my tone neutral. He laughed, dismissing my actions as ridiculous. I offered no response. He attempted to physically restrain me as I walked past, but I pulled away, a surge of defiance coursing through me. He slammed the door behind me, his anger a stark contrast to my newfound sense of detachment. That evening, I took the kids out for ice cream. We sat in the car, savoring our cones, listening to music, the simple act of sharing a treat, a moment of normalcy amidst the chaos. Rhea, her innocence a poignant reminder of what was at stake, asked if we were going on vacation. "Not yet, but maybe soon," I replied, a flicker of hope igniting within me. Leo, ever pragmatic, expressed his desire for a destination with a pool. Upon our return home, Alex's car was absent. I took the kids inside, prepared them for bed, and settled on the couch, scrolling through my phone, researching potential places to stay, a tangible step towards creating an alternative reality. I texted Tara, inquiring about the spare room she had mentioned. She confirmed its availability, but cautioned that it might take some time to finalize the arrangements. "That's fine," I replied. "I'm not in a rush, but I am done waiting for things to magically get better." And that's where I stand. Not dramatic, not tearful, simply done. I refuse to continue cooking, cleaning, and exhausting myself for people who demonstrate such a profound lack of appreciation. If that makes me selfish, so be it. If that makes me a burden, I accept the label. I'd rather be a burden than a doormat. This situation is far from resolved. But for the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of agency, a recognition that I have the power to shape my own destiny, rather than merely reacting to the whims of others. The next few days were a strange mix of tense silence and awkward attempts at normalcy. Alex continued to navigate the situation with a blend of denial and passive aggression. He would avoid direct confrontation, but his every action seemed designed to convey his disapproval. He'd sigh dramatically when he had to do a chore, leave dirty dishes piled in the sink, or pointedly praise Eleanor's cooking whenever she visited. The kids, caught in the crossfire, began exhibiting subtle changes in behavior. Rhea became clingier, seeking constant reassurance, while Leo withdrew, spending hours in his room playing video games. Their usual boisterous energy was replaced by a cautious reserve, a palpable awareness of the fractured atmosphere in the house. I maintained my resolve, refusing to engage in arguments or revert to my old patterns. I focused on my work, spending extra hours at the office, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it provided. I also started taking long walks in the evenings, exploring new neighborhoods, seeking refuge in the anonymity of the city. One evening, I stumbled upon a small bookstore, its windows glowing warmly in the twilight. I wandered inside, drawn to the scent of old paper and the quiet hum of turning pages. I browsed the shelves, my fingers trailing over the spines, seeking a distraction from the turmoil in my life. I found myself drawn to a collection of essays about female empowerment, stories of women who had defied expectations and forged their own paths. I bought the book, eager to immerse myself in narratives of resilience and strength. That night, I stayed up late, reading by the soft glow of the bedside lamp in the guest room. The words resonated with me, affirming my decision to prioritize my own well-being. I highlighted passages that spoke to my experience, quotes about breaking free from toxic relationships and the importance of self-respect. The next day, I received a text from Tara, confirming that the spare room would be available in a week. A wave of relief washed over me, a tangible sign that I was moving forward, taking concrete steps towards creating a new reality. I informed Alex of my plans, choosing a neutral setting, a quiet cafe near our kids' school, to deliver the news. His reaction was surprisingly subdued. He didn't yell or argue. Instead, he simply stared at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and resignation. "You're really going through with this?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes, Alex, I am," I replied, my gaze steady. "What about the kids?" he countered, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. "The kids will be fine," I assured him. "They'll adjust, and they'll be better off seeing their parents happy, even if it's in separate homes." He remained silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The conversation was devoid of the dramatic confrontation I had anticipated. There were no tears, no raised voices, only a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. As the week progressed, I began to pack my belongings, carefully sorting through my clothes, books, and personal items. The kids watched me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Rhea asked if I was going on a trip. "Sort of," I replied, "but I'll be back to see you and Leo every day." Leo, ever practical, inquired about his video games. "You can bring them," I assured him. The night before my planned move, Eleanor called, her tone unusually hesitant. "Can we meet for coffee?" she asked. I agreed, curious about her sudden desire for a conversation. We met at the same cafe where I had confided in Tara, the familiar setting adding a sense of déjà vu to the encounter. Eleanor seemed nervous, her usual composure replaced by a fidgety unease. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice tentative, "about everything that's happened." I waited, offering no encouragement. "I know I haven't been very supportive," she continued, her gaze avoiding mine. "I've been trying to keep the peace." "At my expense," I interjected, my voice flat. She sighed. "I suppose so. But I'm starting to realize that maybe the peace we had wasn't worth it." Her words surprised me. It was the closest she had ever come to acknowledging the injustice of the situation. "Richard is stubborn," she continued. "And Alex, he's always been desperate for his father's approval. I've enabled it, I know. But I'm tired of it too." I listened in silence, unsure how to respond. "I don't know what's going to happen," she said, her voice laced with uncertainty. "But I want you to know that I don't blame you." Her words were a small gesture, but they held a weight of significance. It was a crack in the facade, a glimmer of recognition that perhaps, just perhaps, things could change. The next morning, I packed the last of my things into my car, the kids watching from the doorway. Alex stood beside them, his expression unreadable. I hugged Rhea and Leo tightly, promising to see them soon. I kissed Alex on the cheek, a brief, almost impersonal gesture. Then I drove away, leaving behind the house that had once been my home, the life that had come to feel so suffocating. The drive to Tara's was filled with a mix of emotions: sadness, relief, apprehension, and a flicker of excitement. I felt like I was embarking on a new chapter, a journey into the unknown. Tara greeted me with a warm hug, her support a welcome anchor in the midst of the uncertainty. The spare room was small but cozy, a blank canvas waiting for me to make it my own. The first few days were a whirlwind of settling in, adjusting to a new routine, and navigating the logistics of co-parenting. I established a schedule for seeing the kids, coordinating with Alex to ensure a smooth transition. The kids seemed to adapt surprisingly well. They enjoyed exploring Tara's neighborhood, playing in the nearby park, and having movie nights in the spare room. They missed their home, of course, but they also seemed to appreciate the change of scenery, the opportunity to escape the tension that had permeated our old lives. Alex, however, struggled with the new arrangement. He called frequently, his tone fluctuating between anger, pleading, and guilt-tripping. He accused me of abandoning him, of ruining our family, of being selfish. I listened patiently, offering calm responses, but I refused to be drawn into arguments or guilt into returning. I reiterated my commitment to co-parenting the kids, but I remained firm in my decision to maintain my own space. One evening, I received a text from Richard. It was a long, rambling message filled with accusations and insults. He blamed me for the breakdown of my marriage, for alienating Alex from his family, for disrupting the established order. I read the message. My initial reaction a surge of anger, but then a wave of weariness washed over me. I was tired of his negativity, his constant attempts to control my life. I deleted the message without responding. A few days later, Alex arrived at Tara's apartment, his demeanor unusually subdued. He carried a bouquet of flowers, a gesture so out of character it caught me off guard. I wanted to apologize, he said, his voice hesitant, for everything. I invited him in, offering him a seat on the couch. He sat down, his gaze fixed on his hands. I haven't been a good partner, he admitted. I've prioritized my parents' approval over your feelings. I've taken you for granted. His words were a welcome change from his usual defensiveness. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I know I've hurt you, but I want you to know that I'm trying to change. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and hope. I've been going to therapy, he said, to try to understand why I behave the way I do, to learn how to communicate better. I listened in silence, unsure how to respond. I don't know what the future holds, he said, but I hope we can find a way to co-parent effectively. And maybe someday we can rebuild our relationship. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Alex, I said. And I'm glad you're seeking help. But I need time. I need space. He nodded in understanding. I know, he said. I'm willing to give you as much time as you need. He stayed for a while. We talked about the kids, about their school activities, their hobbies, their hopes and dreams. It was a civil conversation, devoid of anger or resentment. As he left, he handed me the flowers. Thank you, I said, my voice sincere. I placed the flowers on the kitchen table, their vibrant colors a welcome contrast to the muted tones of my temporary dwelling. The following week, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Richard. My heart sank as I recognized his handwriting. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it with trepidation. The letter was surprisingly brief. It contained no accusations, no insults, only a simple apology. I was wrong, he wrote. I have not treated you with the respect you deserve. I am sorry. The sincerity of his words was evident, a stark contrast to his usual arrogance. I read the letter several times, a wave of unexpected emotion washing over me. I didn't know how to feel. Was it genuine? Was it a manipulative attempt to lure me back? I decided to show the letter to Eleanor. We met for lunch, and I handed it to her without comment. She read it carefully, her expression thoughtful. I think he means it, she said. He's been different lately. More reflective, less judgmental. I nodded slowly. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he just misses his grandchildren. That too, she admitted. But I think he's finally realizing the damage he's caused. We talked for a long time about Richard's past, his upbringing, his ingrained beliefs. We talked about Alex's journey of self-discovery, his efforts to break free from the patterns of his childhood. And we talked about my own healing process, my determination to create a life that was authentic and fulfilling. The future remained uncertain. I didn't know if Alex and I would ever reconcile. I didn't know if Richard would truly change. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of maintaining a false sense of peace. I was learning to set boundaries, to assert my needs, to prioritize my well-being. And in doing so, I was discovering a strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, a brighter future lay ahead. Time continued to pass, marked by small milestones and gradual shifts. The kids settled into a comfortable routine, spending weekdays with Alex and weekends with me. They seemed to appreciate the distinct rhythms of each household, the different rules and traditions that shaped our separate lives. Alex, true to his word, continued his therapy sessions. He became more attentive, more empathetic, more willing to listen without defensiveness. He started taking on more responsibilities at home, sharing the burden of chores and childcare. The change in him was palpable, a slow but steady transformation that gave me pause. Richard's attempts at reconciliation were less consistent. He would have periods of civility, followed by occasional relapses into his old patterns of judgment and criticism. Eleanor, however, remained a steady source of support, acting as a bridge between us, facilitating communication and understanding. I focused on building my own life, creating a sanctuary in Tara's spare room. I decorated it with artwork and plants, filling it with books and music, surrounding myself with things that brought me joy and peace. I reconnected with old friends, pursuing hobbies I had neglected, rediscovering passions that had faded into the background of my busy life. I also began exploring new avenues for my career, taking on freelance projects that challenged me creatively and allowed me to work on my own terms. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief in my own abilities that had been dormant for too long. One evening, Alex invited me to dinner, not at our old house, but at a neutral restaurant, a small Italian place we had always enjoyed. I hesitated, unsure of his motives, but I agreed. The dinner was surprisingly pleasant. We talked about the kids, about our work, about our hopes for the future. Alex shared insights from his therapy, his growing awareness of his own insecurities, and his tendency to seek external validation. He didn't pressure me, didn't make any promises, but simply expressed his desire to rebuild our connection, to create a healthier foundation for our relationship. As the months passed, the lines between our separate lives began to blur. We attended school events together, celebrated birthdays as a family, and even took the kids on a weekend trip to the beach. The kids thrived in this new arrangement, their resilience and adaptability a testament to their inherent strength. They learned to navigate the complexities of having two homes, appreciating the unique qualities of each. One sunny afternoon, Alex invited me to the park. He had packed a picnic basket, and we spread a blanket beneath a large oak tree. The kids ran and played, their laughter echoing through the air. As we watched them, Alex took my hand. His touch was gentle, tentative, but filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "I miss us," he said, his voice soft. "I miss our life together." I looked at him, my heart filled with a mixture of emotions. I had come to appreciate the changes he had made, the effort he had put into becoming a better version of himself. But I was also wary, hesitant to fully trust again. "I miss parts of it too," I admitted. "But I also cherish the independence I've found, the strength I've discovered." He nodded in understanding. "I know," he said. "I don't expect you to forget the past. But I hope we can create a new future, one where we both feel valued and respected." We sat in silence for a while, holding hands, watching our children play. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting a golden light on our faces. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the uncertainty that lay ahead. I didn't know if Alex and I would ever fully reconcile, if we would ever live together again. But I knew that we had both grown, that we had both learned valuable lessons about love, respect, and the importance of self-worth. And that, I realized, was a positive note in itself. The journey had been painful, filled with challenges and heartache. But it had also been a journey of self-discovery, a testament to the power of resilience and the enduring capacity for change. The ending wasn't a fairy tale reunion, but it was a hopeful beginning. It was a recognition that love and family can take many forms, and that happiness is not always found in the picture-perfect ideal. It was a story about learning to prioritize yourself, about setting boundaries, and about finding strength in the face of adversity. And it was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of growth, healing, and a brighter future.